Welcome to the Introspection Banter podcast. I'm Anthony.
I'm Gabe.
So, Gabe, what's your favorite mythological creature?
Hmm. So let me tell you about one of the interesting mythological creature, or I guess so technically would be more of a cryptid. I was gonna say maybe the chupacabra, which originated in Puerto Rico but has somehow migrated over to like southwestern America and Mexico.
That's an interesting one. I definitely would not have gone for that. I probably would have said like Griffin or something.
Griffin.
Yeah.
Get
Actually,
the
now
weak
you have
shit
me
out of here.
wondering, are cryptids like mythology?
So that's an interesting question, right?
I certainly think they have foundation in it.
Well, I mean, like, what is mythology if not like random stories that you start making up? But that's what cryptids essentially start out as. I mean,
Yeah.
like, there's some argument to be made that some of the cryptids shown may actually be animals that are mistaken for like weird animals. Like, I think the Mothman. I genuinely believe the Mothman was literally just a giant owl that people kept seeing in the area and like kept exaggerating until like it became like this massive story about like this giant creature going around talking like scaring people. Because if you look at the original depictions of him, and they literally describe him like this fluffy ass weird moth looking thing. I'm like 90% sure that was just a fucking giant ass owl just flying a boat, you know?
I see what you're saying. I think it gets interesting too because there's some, and I remember my brother had a book on cryptids, and some of them are like way more believable than others. Like the chupacabra. I mean, when you get down to like the whole like, is it like a sick dog or something or a coyote? Uh, that
Yeah.
really makes an interesting standpoint. But I know like the cryptids book had like the one like Baba Yaga was in there.
Not a fucking cryptid.
No, I swear.
What the fuck? The fucking witch? Ah, yes. My favorite cryptids. The Chupacabra, Sasquatch, and this old woman that lives in a cabin with chicken legs in the woods. Who the fuck wrote that book?
Don't ask me.
Fire them.
My mythology is a weird concept in general.
Well, I mean, it's like myths tend to just be like foundational stories that are told by cultures, right?
Yeah.
And people do sort of believe in them. I mean, there's a connotation nowadays when people talk about mythology that they mean like the pantheon of some sort of culture. Like when I say Greek mythology, you think of the Greek gods, but mythology really is just stories passed down that, unlike legends, aren't based in fact. They're just there, like certain beliefs that they hold. Like certain myths may not be the foundation for certain religions. They just might just be things that are told within a community. Sometimes just to explain like why things are the way they are. You know?
Yeah, like with humanity, the world in general.
Well, like, one of my favorite myths, and I think I've told you about it before, is the explanation as to why vaginas exist the way they exist. It's like a Native American myth where apparently vaginas at one point had teeth, and this guy's like daughters would eat people with their vaginas because they had teeth. But then some dude was like, I gotta stop these people from eating people with their vaginas. So he went up to their house, which was also made of vaginas, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. Gave them a sort of medicine which caused their vaginas to lose all their teeth, and thus now they could only suck. And thus explains why vaginas don't have teeth. It is one of
Take
the
note.
weirdest myths I have ever read.
Take note, guys. Me and Gabe had the same Native American history class where we also learned about some of the mythology, and Gabe remembers that one, and I remember some people climbing out of a tree.
Oh yeah, there's that one too, explaining how they got to the area, the duality of man.
Yeah. Mythology has a pretty big impact on culture. I mean, it is
The
tied
foundation
in
of
with
it,
religion. Yeah,
right? Yeah.
foundationally, yeah.
Yeah. So like you see this especially in like Europe. when you think about Europe, it's just a bunch of land that has divided itself between like different nation states nowadays, and a lot of that has to do with the fact of like identity, right? Why did
Yeah.
the people in the Gaul Peninsula decide to unite under French, like under like the banner of France, right? And part of it's like the politics, right? But the other thing is too is like the identity of the people, and that identity is shaped by the culture that was made, and a part of the culture there, especially in the early days, would have been the mythology that was shared. In France, you have like the Song of Roland, right, which is about Charlemagne and his 12 peers. Specifically, it's about how Roland cost the lives of a bunch of the other paladins because he was too arrogant to blow a fucking Muslims were attacking. But that's considered to be one of the foundational, like one of the foundational pieces of literature for France. But it's really just mythology because chances are, like, while there was a battle involving Charlemagne and his 12 peers against some Muslims, probably most of the shit told in the legends about them aren't like actually real. And while technically, I guess that falls into the category of more legend than myth, it's the
Mm.
same concept. It's you make up these stories, everyone hears them. The person down the street hears them, and you guys now have like a shared like connection with one another. Because hey, we both value these people, these stories. Uh, so we're not that different from one another. We speak the same language, more or less, and essentially you create like a shared identity with one another, right? So you have the French in this part, or at least the this what's it called, the Longueuil speaking French people, and then you have a different identity. It's down the road, and it's like, oh, those are the Spaniards, right? They have a whole different set of myths that they started listening, bunch of stories that they started to what's it called, that they hold dear to themselves.
Yeah. I think it's interesting how some cultures, you see this especially with the Greeks and the Romans, uh integrate other mythologies into their own.
Yeah, you know what? That happens. The thing with like myths is that a lot of times, even like studying them nowadays, we lose a lot of the context behind them
Yeah.
because they are unique to a culture. Even when they integrate other mythologies, a lot of times a lot of that context is lost. For instance, do you know what's it called when what's her name? Goddess of
Uh
beauty in Greek, Aphrodite. When
uh
Aphrodite was first included into the Greek pantheon, originally she was also a goddess of war as well.
no, I did not know that. I know
And so, yeah,
Aries was
yeah. Well,
usually
Ares took on that mantle, and you notice they're
okay.
tied together. The
Yeah.
idea was that the Greeks couldn't understand how a woman could also be beautiful and goddess of war as well. So they were like, nah, she's just a goddess of beauty. But then look at how the Romans took her and turned her into Venus. She was still a goddess of beauty, but they also tied it back into her warrior aspect. Why? Because the Romans were a warlike people, were very warrior like, and they conquered a good portion of the world. So you see how like it changes. Same with Dionysus, if I'm not mistaken, god of was it partying and wine,
Yeah.
was also originally also the had a domain of was also part of the deaf domain. Yet the Greeks sort of forgot about the whole deaf thing because they really liked wine and partying. See how it changes as like a different culture like takes it. It's thought that Pandora also was some sort of like goddess for like an earlier forgotten and lost religion that viewed her as like some sort of patron, but when the Greeks took her story, they just turned her into like, oh, look at this foolish woman opening a box and causing all the bad things in the world to like appear.
Yeah, I didn't know some of these.
It's mythology is fun to like
Yeah. I know
look
about the
at.
Bull of Minos. Do you know about that one?
The bull and what?
Minos?
Minos? I don't
Yeah, the
know that
Minotaur.
one. Oh, the Minotaur. Yes, I know about that one.
Do you know like the theories behind how he got into the mythology? Like the Greek mythology?
Maybe not. Tell me what they are.
So there was an island, I think it was might have been Crete or something like that. I don't remember entirely, but it was theorized that this island was like way before like the Greeks at the time, like 200 years before or so. And they went there investigating the place, and they had very strange architecture that they weren't familiar with. and it was maze-like, like a labyrinth. And this island used the bull as a lot of their, like, it was very important to them. The bull was, so they put a lot of bull designs on the walls, and believe there were like a bunch of skeletons there. I don't remember how like that culture like ended, and like some of that you could see mixed into the Greek mythology of today with the labyrinth and the bull at the center of the labyrinth.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like I said, like you said, like it, or was it me or you? It doesn't matter. Mythology changes, based on the
yeah,
context of the people
and
who are telling the story or writing
yeah,
it or
like
reinterpreting it, because that happens too. Uh,
like with like
mhm.
you know about the All Mother.
The All Mother. What's that?
Like a lot of cultures before they accepted like uh like I think this was like before Greek mythology and stuff, because a lot of cultures started out as uh praying to a goddess that represented the earth and fertility, and I think this is similar to, I'm trying to think the goddess name. I think it begins with a G. Either way, like an all caring sort of motherly figure.
Yeah, like okay. You say that. I'm thinking of some of the native traditions over here in the West. In the Americas, usually have mothers at the center of the pantheon.
Yeah.
Like or if not at the center, they have like really high positions in the pantheon.
And I'm interested to know, like, what happened to them. Like, are they still like
Uh,
leading figures?
so in Europe, I think it kind of switched over to the more patriarchal system.
Yeah, that's where I wanted to know. I wanted to know if you knew about that.
Well, I mean, like even like what I said about Pandora, right? Here's
Yeah,
like a female goddess, and oh, we're just gonna suddenly turn her into like an idiot in our new like view religion.
yeah.
It's weird. Yeah, like the other thing too is like how you notice this like in Europe, but like it didn't happen in the Americas. In the Americas, I think their religions or their myths stayed the same. Problem was that then when the Europeans arrived, they kind of destroyed some of them or didn't allow them to like continue evolving on their own
I do
without
think
like
some of it was the big cultures at the time, like Romans and Greece. They had such a major influence.
because like they were both conquerors. Like there was Alexander the Great who conquered a good portion of the world, spreading Hellenism, and
Hmm.
the Romans too, which kind of forced people to spread their own, like follow the whole worship cult that they had. Then you had, especially in Europe, you had Christianity, kind of becoming the dominant religion, which kind of then reinterpreted all those other myths into like these pagan religions kind of sort of became like all these about evil things, right? I
Yeah,
mean, the whole archetype for like Satan for like the WoW was based off Pan because they were just trying to demonize Pan, pun not intended. Then in the opposite end, you also had the Arabic empire, the Muslim empire, also like spreading Islam through other parts of the world. So that became the dominant religion in other parts, which kind of like also did the same thing that Christianity did to like some of the pagan religions. Um, some point they did allow like peaceful like existence of like different groups, but I don't know. At some point it kind of started to change. See that especially like if you look at like Orthodox Coptics in Egypt, how they were treated and how they're still treated sometimes, unfortunately, over there. A
oh
lot of
damn.
like yeah, there's a lot of argument there, unfortunately, on both sides. But religion's a sort of mythology.
Yeah, I
Like,
wish I knew more about like Asian mythology.
so do I. I think
Because
it's
I
interesting.
mean, we're definitely finding a lot of connections in Greek and like European mythology in general. But like, I don't really know enough Asian mythology to bring any of those
Talk about.
connections up.
We're both. I mean, we're both like Americans, so I don't think we would know much about like our Eastern counterparts. Unfortunately,
Yeah,
I know a little bit about Shinto, but it's at a very superficial level from like just watching anime.
I just know the tale of Princess Kaguya.
That's a good one. That's not that. That's like I think shared by a
or
bunch of, right? Like China and Japan both look at that myth together.
I think you might be right. I'm not entirely
They're
sure
like,
though.
yeah, Kaguya, that's a good one. Do you
Yeah.
know of I don't know if it would count as mythology, but like Journey to the West? Have you
Yeah,
heard
that's
any?
that very famous Chinese story.
Right. Would that be considered mythology?
I mean, aren't there
Involves
like some mythological like creatures in it?
well, so I assume the mythological characters in it, like monkey, and I guess
Yeah, I was
pigs
gonna
you would
say,
count as
isn't there
that.
a talking monkey or some sort of traveling monkey?
Yeah, I think it's like the Monkey King or whatever. Sun Wukong. That's who he is. Buddha appears in it, or at least in the yeah, Buddha's in it. I'm pretty sure. Like in the beginning part where they talk about
No.
monkey,
I
he
mean, I will say if it's not mythology, I don't know much about that story, but if it's not mythology, then it'd definitely be one of those things that maybe it's a legend. And you could say this about a lot of stuff like Gilgamesh. Uh, I mean, we don't
Gilgamesh.
know if Beowulf was ever actually a real person.
I think Gilgamesh would fall under the legend category because Gilgamesh did exist. And I'm glad you are reading Gilgamesh, right? Hmm? Hmm? Are you reading
Yeah,
Gilgamesh, young man?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, you better be reading Gilgamesh. Because Gilgamesh was an actual king, so thus we know that there was at least some facts. Kind of like King Arthur. We're pretty sure King Arthur probably did exist. Probably didn't do most of the stuff in his stories, but
What?
was real at one point. Yeah, I'm sorry, Anthony. He didn't pull a sword out of a fucking lake that was gifted to him by some sort of like
No.
nymph. What's the other version? He pulled it out of the stone or something like that.
Yeah, that is the other version.
Well, that's the thing is like there's contradictory stories about him too because he's become a legend. Legends have a tendency of taking like actual facts and then making them larger than life, to the point where we don't even know like what's real anymore.
That's true. Yeah, I kind of wonder what the entire purpose of legends are.
Mythology. I think legends really are just a different type of mythology.
But they use actual people
They use
or
actual
like
people.
events.
Like we've built like take a country like ours where we
Yeah.
don't have that thousands of years of tradition, right? I mean, there's the Native Americans, but that's their own culture. The American culture, which started when we, started colonizing this land and taking it from the natives, it was we didn't have like that sort of like thousand years tradition, so we had to create our own mythology and we used whatever was around us. You look at all the like the myths and like all the myths surrounding like some of the founding fathers because we started making our own.
Oh, you are correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Then there's also like forcibly creating mythology. Great example I think is Washington Irving's like a sketchbook of Jeffrey Crayon. The whole gist of it is like here's this guy kind of like looking around different grabbing different stories from America's quote unquote. So he created the myth of Rip Van Winkle, Headless Horseman, which were based off older forms of mythology from like the old countries,
Hmm.
but Americanized them. Because I
Yeah.
think that's what serves. And it's an artificial mythology. It's not one that developed naturally. It's just one that Irving put out there and has since taken their own life, right? Because I think
Yeah.
Sleepy Hollow, like the town of Sleepy Hollow, like does their own celebration of like the Headless Horseman, like I think yearly, because they know it's such a big like thing now in the American pop culture. I
You
hell
see
I live in New Jersey. We have the Jersey Devil over here. That's a myth that's kind of just like sprouted over here.
you
You
see
have a bunch of
authors.
shit too. Hmm?
Wait,
Sorry,
what? Oh,
I was
I
gonna
was gonna say
say
you see authors make their own mythology quite often,
yeah.
like Lovecraft.
Yeah, I was just about to bring him up. Lovecraft has the Cthulhu mythos, which he made from the ground up, but I'm pretty sure he based it off a lot of other things. I know a lot of people have pointed out that there seems to be, at least in the literary philosophy of it, there seems to be a lot of connections with like Islamic Sufism. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that
Oh yeah,
properly. Yeah, which is interesting considering Lovecraft's not exactly the most open to like other cultures, to say the
racist
least.
culture.
Yeah, for the most part. I don't know. I don't know exactly what his thoughts were on like Arabs and Muslims, to be honest. I know he liked the Asians. Funny enough, he did
Oh,
talk, or at the very least, he liked the Japanese because he did talk about their culture in a positive light in some of his letters. But a lot of people have pointed out that there's a lot of a lot of the creatures and some of the stories that Lovecraft wrote have some elements of Sufism in it,
Hmm.
which is interesting. But Lovecraft made his own mythology from the ground up, creating creatures, purposely contradicting sometimes some of the things in his stories, just like actual mythology does. Because you're not gonna have like a perfect presentation of a character if different people are writing stories and legends based off them, right?
Yeah, that's true. Especially if they're thousands, hundreds, like very old.
Mm-hmm. Like how Athena is like the goddess of wisdom and war in Greek mythology, yet she in another story gets jealous and turns a woman into like a spider monster. So like, what's the point? Which version of Athena is the accurate one? Thing is, it's both because it's just different writers from different periods of like history, like taking their own spin on a character.
Yeah, I will say, like modern interpretations, you see a lot of different ways of the Greek gods displayed. I mean,
Mm.
a lot of the same foundation.
Look at we want to talk about like reinterpretation. Just look at religion's a great example of how it changes over time to better fit like the culture that's in, and how stories and characters kind of like have different reinterpretations. The story of was it Abraham and his son, who's about to be who Abraham's about to sacrifice to God. In its original telling, was probably the explanation as to why Jews, or they weren't called Jews at that time, why the Hebrews, the Hebrew tribes did not sacrifice their firstborn because it was a very common practice in those days, but yet they didn't do it. So they created this story about how God had told them, well, you don't got to do that. That's the point of the story. Then you have Christians reinterpret it as, look at how faithful Abraham is. He would sacrifice his own son for God. And they completely changed the meaning of it. Same with like the Satan figure in the Bible. In the Old Testament, there is no like evil like Satan character. There is a Satan who appears in Job, but he is a follower of God. If you notice in that whole book, literally shows up for like a meeting. God asks him what you've been doing. He says, "I've been roaming the earth." And then he goes, then God's like, "Hey, have you seen Job?" He's like, "Yeah, but you know what, God? I don't think he would follow you if you like didn't bless him so much." And then God's just like, "Go fuck with him." And Sam's like, "I." That's it. He listens to God that whole book. He's not the bad guy. Well, he's the bad guy to Job, but he's not the bad guy, like how Christians present him like later on, or how the serpent somehow is now recontextualized in Christian mythology as as also the devil. Yet there's no connection by like the Hebrew people in the Old Testament with that. It's just the serpent. Like there's nothing about that serpent that would imply that it's the devil.
And I told you how the serpent. I'm pretty sure I've told you this before. How that also related to the like all mother concept that they prayed to.
Yeah. What was
Yeah, it
it
was like
like?
one of her divine pets or something.
Hmm, interesting. Again, with the whole like patriarchy overtaking the matriarch in the ancient matriarch is being replaced by like the more male dominated called religion. Probably
Hmm.
just as a reflection of like this how society also kind of changed. I think
Yeah.
in most cultures, I think it's always the one who can provide more is usually the most dominant, like in society. So
Hmm.
you have like in Europe and whatnot, it's males probably because they were the ones who supplied the house with most income or resources. Whereas if you look at some of like the Native American societies, they were very female dominated. Like they might vote like the you would have like the females in the clans vote on a male for the chief, but really his role was just to lead men into battle. Ultimately, the power rested on them, and they're probably one of the reasons for that was probably because despite the whole like stereotype, Native Americans were not necessarily good hunters. So that's you had women doing the whole agriculture aspect, and guess what? If that's really the main way how you're gonna get food for the next few months, they're probably going to become the more dominant members of society to begin with. It's like something that we see repeated throughout like different cultures, not just in specific ones.
Yeah, I mean, mythology changes
Well,
as we can
mythology is
see.
also mythology reflects also like the society that it's in at that point,
Yeah,
right? Because you have the going back to the Christian example of Satan, like you need now a bad guy figure for your religion to get people to join your church. So you just grab whatever you had written down and just be like, "Hey, this is now the bad guy." Satan made a jump from this caricature that would appear like in old school, like old like plays into like this evil malignant figure who had agents all over Earth by the end of like the bubonic plague time for some reason. I guess they needed a scapegoat for all the suffering they were going through. Mythology's weird,
yeah,
is what I'm getting at. It's
yeah.
ever
I
changing.
could agree with that. So I mean, some of the stories are pretty interesting, and all that. I don't like some of the like American mythology. Like Paul Bunyan's just a weird one. You know about him?
Yeah, that's the guy who I always greet when I'm going down like the. I'm not gonna say the name of the street actually because that might give away where I live, but when I get off like the interstate and I'm passing by and I see a big ass statue of him in like the lumber yard, I'm like, what the fuck?
I I don't know anything about like the origin of that story, but it bothers me how much it is similar to the uh one guy that could break rocks. Remember, was it John something?
John Henry, the black one.
John Henry. Yeah.
He's the
But
black
on the
Paul
other side, you
Bunyan.
got Paul Bunyan, this white guy who's going to do almost like the stories are very similar, except instead of breaking rocks, he's chopping wood.
I wonder which came first.
I don't know.
Do you think maybe Paul Bunyan's like a whitewashed version of John Henry?
You know, we haven't used the concept folklore. I didn't even think of that. American folk hero.
Folklore is a type of mythology. That's why.
Yeah. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right.
Like I think what really is the context myth. When people say mythology, they think of like the gods of Greece and whatnot. But
That's the like I think a lot of minds go to that. I mean, hell, we tied it into cryptids.
yeah, and cryptids, I guess, would be more intrinsically tied to folklore when you think about it, right? Because it's usually
Yeah.
regional.
Yeah.
Like Jersey Devil might be a cryptid. We talked about him too, and that's heavily tied into like the New Jersey folklore, local folklore of my state. I don't know what's up with your state. You guys got like a bunch of haunted places. I think you have the Seven Gates of Hell over there, or something like
Silent
that.
Hill.
You have the literal inspiration for the Silent Hill movie. It's Centralia. That's not really folklore though. That's an actual tragedy, Anthony.
But Pennsylvania's a fucked up place to live.
Oh hell yeah! You
Like
got like the weird ass shit. You got the Seven Gates of Hell, a town that's literally burning underneath. You got the Mason Dixon line. No, the Mason Dixon line is not in Pennsylvania, is it?
that's the line that separates Pennsylvania to Maryland.
Ah, you got the cultural Mason Dixon line there though.
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. Yin say pop instead of soda, which is fucking weird.
Yeah,
Yeah,
happens.
yeah, y'all are weird down there.
It depends on where you live in Pennsylvania. I'll say
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Pennsylvania is as weird as mythology. Are we sure Pennsylvania isn't just some mythological state that everyone just
Allentown is.
pretends? Oh, oh no.
I gotta be honest, I don't know anything about Allentown. I was just like, yo, let me see if I can start some beef. I want someone from Allentown to listen to this and be like, what did he say?
Fuck you, just say. Don't do that, because then they're just gonna attack New Jersey like everyone else does. I don't know why people attack New Jersey when Florida exists. Come on, man.
That's true.
Whatever New Jersey got going on, Florida got it 10 times worse.
You think Florida man's mythology?
Florida man, that's a good. Florida man has entered into the common vernacular as like its own separate
Folklore?
noun. It's a
Yeah,
noun.
yeah.
It's like a noun. Like
It is.
Florida man is no longer like an adjective to apply to like a suspect in an incident or anything. It's literally a noun. Like a Florida man did this.
I've seen it used like in newspapers, like like they'll usually write like New Jersey man, but no, instead there's like Florida man.
It's getting to a point where non-English speakers are getting confused as to why Florida man gets so much special attention. And Americans have to like explain to them why, because Florida man is an entity unto itself. Lovecraft may have given birth to like Cthulhu and like Abaddon with Azathoth, but America gave birth to Florida man, and it's 10 times worse.
Put it back.
Put it back. Tell the Seminoles they can have the state. We're leaving the land to them. It's no longer part of the Union. It's unincorporated territory.
Ain't nothing good. Ain't nothing good down there in Florida.
What did Jeff Dunham say? What was like, leave it to the Cubans to get down.
I don't know what comedy skit you're referencing. I know Jeff Dunham.
Yeah, I think it was with like Walter, the old man. How the hell did we get here? We're talking about mythology.
I have no idea. Because mythology relates back to culture.
Oh my god! Oh my
and
god!
then we
dude.
started talking about cultural mythology.
I would not be surprised if like a couple decades from now we have mythology surrounding Florida man. Like Florida man becomes like a certain like an actual like character in like American mythology.
You're
Mark
making
my
me think of
words.
like more recent mythology. You know what? This just made me think of creepypastas a little bit too.
Creepy pastas are a form of folklore, which I would say is a form of mythology.
I feel like you're slowing down as you're saying that. Like, you brought up a good point, and I hate
You
it.
brought up a good point, sir, and I don't want to admit it, but I'm fucking pissed, and I have to like give you the credit for it. Slender Man is a
Yeah,
myth.
that was my first thought.
Jeff the Killer is another myth.
Shittily written, but a myth.
Shittily written, but a myth. Myth nonetheless. Fucking all those like weird like shit you share to people on the internet is like a fucking myth. Hell, those email chains, those cursed email chains that people send each other are myths. Technically, when you think about it, they're horror stories people tell each other. Like well, not legends because they're not based in truth, but old like myths of like folklorish, like do this or like fucking 7 days. I don't know, Sadako's gonna come out of your TV and like kill you or something. They're all like part of that sort of weird internet mythology, which doesn't really have one country to it. It's
What the
just
hell?
like the internet. It's shared like on a global scale. And hell, like just like mythology, people like to create stuff for it too. Like the whole like fake portrait of Slender Man, that death fighting the soldier, and it has like multiple arms. That shit's fake. I don't know why people keep bringing that up about like why Slender Man is real by looking at that, because that drawing is photoshopped to have those extra arms. All
Fucking duh.
those old myths, yeah, all those myths of like the tall man in German or whatever. Also bullshit. They might have some small basis, like there may be like a reference to like a tall man in German mythology or whatever, but it's like it has nothing to do with Slender Man. People are adding shit to it just to give it more credence, which is something you see a lot in mythology. You have like people like sometimes so there's like this old legend called, I forget. There's like two versions of it. One where the guy like his son died or whatever, or something like that, or his family got burnt to ash because some kids were like at a camp were like messing with him. So he went and slaughtered the kids. Then the people in the camp killed him, but now his soul like haunts the camp and like kills people. The second version of that myth is that he kills people with his fingernails, and his name's like Freddy Fingernails, and people say that's where fucking Freddy Krueger was thought of. Yet the second version of that myth does not exist before fucking did not exist before up until Nightmare on Elm Street was released. So they literally like retroactively created a myth or created a different version of a myth just to be like mine came first, even though that's not the case.
Mm.
So people make bullshit up just to like just I guess to feel special about themselves, or just to like what to call the, I forget, there's a term for it, retro something, for when you create myths to explain something new, or false myths just to like, and just to try to pass it off as like it was an older tale that But in reality, it's something modern.
I don't have a clue what
I
that would be
don't know
called.
what it's called, but shit like that happens. Speaking of weird
Hmm.
mythology, another on topic of like mythology inspiring other things. Did you know there's an old in New Jersey? There's a camp called Camp Crystal Lake.
I did not.
Yeah, and there's an old tale about Crosby. There's a guy named
Oh, is,
Crosby. He lost his
is it?
son. Crosby, it's all is a myth unto itself. I'll explain that in a second. But Crosby, in this version of the Crosby myth, his son drowned. So then he started killing the camp counselors in revenge, which is exactly like a specific horror film. You know the
Yeah,
one.
yeah. I was gonna mention that because it was Crystal Lake.
The funny thing is that this version of the myth is way before the whole Jason franchise came out. Because there are records of it back from like I think the 1930s published in like newspaper clippings or like local journals, which is weird because then Crosby also became a horror movie. I forget what it was called, but it's about like a axe maniac or whatever. Now you were gonna say something before I cut you off. What were you gonna say?
Oh, well, I was gonna bring up that Camp Crystal Lake thing because I was
Yeah,
gonna ask if that was the place from the fucking one movie. I can't think of it. It don't matter though.
13th Friday 13th. Yeah, I question that too. I think it might just be a coincidence, honestly, or like
Yeah.
subconsciously, like they might have used it as reference without even thinking about it. Because we're
Yeah.
talking
What's
about
your
like
favorite mythology?
my favorite myth, or like my favorite like group of mythology.
I mean, any way you want to answer it, I'm fine
My
with.
favorite like group are like the Hebrew myth, as Hebrew mythology
Yeah.
before the Christian reinterpretation. A lot of the shit that especially like starting from like the Second Temple period, that's when you really see things like sectionalism enter like a lot of their mythology writing. So you actually start seeing like fallen angels start to become a play. A lot of the stuff that came out from this era of like the Hebrew religion, or I guess at this point they would be called Jews. Uh, you actually see influence like early Christianity, despite none of it making into the canon Bible. Things like the books of Enoch, the Book of Watchers, the Book of Jubilees. I don't know. Things like, oh, there's a group of fallen angels, something which would play into the whole Satan myth later on down the line. Yet none of that's in the actual Bible. And there's like earlier stuff too, like their Hebrew version of like succubi are really weird. They're like I think I like Lilith being one of them, the first wife of Adam. The way how they're depicted, though, I think it's like extremely different from like the modern version of a succubus, as this hot, like sexy creature who wants to like make people cum. Whereas in like old, whereas in the older depictions of a succubus, they're like these hideous creatures. I think the Hebrews and specifically they talk about how penetrating them was like penetrating a cavern of ice. How their vaginas were always leaking pus, semen, and piss. They were disgusting creatures that would force their way with you, which makes them 10 times scarier if you ask me.
I think it's interesting to see mythology changed a lot differently from its original source material,
Yeah.
like the Little Mermaid.
Mm.
I'm
Yeah.
trying to think of that. I mean, I feel like some of like the Grimm's tales have been changed quite a lot to make them more child friendly.
You know what it is too? It's a lot of it's like what people do, right? Because people will take myths, right? Incorporate
Yeah.
into their writing, changes that people's perception of that myth greatly. The next time I hear someone refer like a skinwalker and use it incorrectly, I'm gonna fucking shit myself. Because skinwalkers are a very specific type of witch, malevolent witch, mind you. For I forget the name of the tribe, the specific like Indian Native American group, but it's very specific. Yet people use that nilly willy like nothing to like usually refer to shapeshifters. I'm just like it's not what a fucking skinwalker is, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just like what the fuck you doing? You're like taking someone else's like myth, right, and like just change it. But now like whenever like someone thinks about like uh fucking skinwalkers, they just think, oh, shapeshifter. It's like kind of like how the Wendigo is like what's it called? They like people see as like some sort of antler monster creature thing. nowadays, just because that's how it's usually depicted in a lot of like cinema and horror,
Mm.
even though it may not be entirely accurate to what it was originally.
I didn't know that's how it's pronounced. Do you know if that's right?
Ouijago? I think
Yeah.
that's how it's pronounced in Algon. I don't even know
Well, I
how
was
to
gonna
pronounce
say
the
I've heard
language.
Wendigo.
Yeah, I think it's
I
like
will
the
say I don't think
common.
that mythological creature gets enough attention because like the designs of the artists give them look cool as hell.
Yeah, I think it's Wendigo's like the modern, uh, like pronunciation of it in like English, but I think the Wendigo might be the more closer pronunciation to the original native language.
Yeah. Okay.
I could be entirely wrong though, so don't quote me on that. Take my knowledge with a grain of salt. I only know that I do not know. Wendigos are also weird because they're also situational, like stories about kind of like metaphors for like human greed or when you're or human greed or like suffering through these long cold winters. Hitting famine too. Hell, I'm pretty sure at one point Wendigos were just seen as like what's it called? Were seen as just like synonyms for like the Yeti
Do you
for
know
some
quite a
reason.
lot about them?
Wendigos?
Yeah.
Not really.
I was gonna say like the way you're describing it, I was like, oh shit, I don't know anything about this
Here,
uh
here's a funny
mythological
thing.
creature.
Some cultures hold their mythology very dear to themselves.
Yeah.
Native Americans are known greatly for that. They do not like sharing their their mythology to other people. They're very like there's very like dear to them or sacred. I don't know what would be the proper term.
Uh,
Like the Ouijigos are also like kind of fall into that category, which is why I don't know much about them. I also just haven't taken the time to like just be like go into like a deep dive into them. So you get like these little glimpses in like pop culture. I mean, there was what was that one video game that had them, right? You know which one I'm talking about? The one like horror game that was like kind of like a B movie
I
where your decisions
don't.
shift. I think it's like House of Ash
Oh,
movie game.
oh, that's what you're talking about. I thought it was Until Dawn.
Until Dawn, that's what's called. But wasn't it made by House of Ashes? Like the House of Ashes group production team or whatever it's called?
I don't know.
Well, either way, that's one of them. I'm pretty sure they appeared in like quite a few stories. Supernatural, I'm pretty sure did a whole episode of the Wendigo,
Hmm.
where I think they pronounce it as Wendigo. I don't know. It's weird. Harry, this
So
is gonna be the theme of this episode. It's weird.
it's weird.
Yeah. It's weird. I don't understand it. It's strange.
So how would you go about using mythology in your own writing?
So you know how I just talked about how like the natives don't like when you do that.
Yes.
I was gonna say that it's a very like slippery slope whenever you use mythology. Usually things like the Greek myths and Roman myths are usually fine because the people who actually like worship these deities and whatnot or believed in these myths are dead. But even then, I want to point out that like neo-Hellenism does exist, and there are people who do worship these gods still today. So even then, it's scary. There's also that time in Smite got in trouble because they do use the Hindu pantheon as for some of their characters, and the Hindus did not like how their versions of some of their gods.
I think I did hear about that.
Yeah, you gotta be careful, like whenever you do that. Honestly, though, I think if you're creating your own story, you might as well create your own mythology. Lovecraft did it, and look how well it turned out for him. His mythology has outlived him to the point where
It's
people still use it
true.
nowadays.
Very true. Again.
Although I do want to point out that some cultures don't mind as much. Divine Comedy is literally just Bible fan fiction, and people don't mind it as much. Although then they also
Good
get
point.
pissed off when Good Omens was made, which also is essentially Bible fan fiction.
Mm.
So I don't know.
How do they feel about Paradise Lost?
Paradise Lost is another one, I guess, that's also respected, but some people hate the fact that Lucifer's treated as a good guy. But thing is, it's like if you read it, it's not so much as he is a good guy; he just has like the like traditionally heroic traits.
Yeah, because the way they do perspective in that one.
If you're gonna like write using other people's mythology or beliefs, just be very careful.
Yeah.
Ultimately, understand one thing though is like if you're a writer, you're never gonna please everyone. You know, you're gonna write one thing or say one thing, and people are like, I don't really like that, and you're gonna piss someone off. But it's not a bad thing. If you were to be worried about like every little thing in your story pissing people off, you would not get very far in your writing. You would just be going back constantly, rewriting things, then having to rewrite them again and again and again, and then you'll never get anything published. I'm pretty sure we had a conversation where we were talking about I had an idea for a character and I said the name and you pointed something out to me that I did not realize at all.
Oh,
I was telling you
yeah.
about a shape-shifting alien that who essentially is a troubadour that goes around collecting stories and songs and learning about other races, but it like disguised itself as them, and I said his name was going to be Jungler or Jungler as it would be pronounced. I probably also butchered that. Uh, and then you'd mentioned to me like, yeah, like in the 1930s, 1940s,
60s.
1960s, that
50s.
was also the name
Yeah.
for an actor in white and blackface. I was like, well, fuck me. I didn't know that, and I'm pretty sure that if I were to ever like actually include that name in a story with a shape shifting alien, someone would probably make the connection that I was not trying to make and be pissed off.
I
Am I
mean,
gonna
yeah,
go
I'd say
change the
it all
name?
depends on if how important the name is.
Yeah, I was gonna
Because
say
people
if
are
I
gonna
well
pick at it all
yeah,
day.
you have to you have to draw the line somewhere. I think a
Yeah.
good way is just getting like a sensitivity reader. I think it's what someone mentioned to me. You're gonna write about something, maybe grab someone from that group of people to take a look at your story, see if they feel anything major about it. If it's okay, then it's okay. If they're like, maybe you might want to change some things, then maybe take some of their advice, see if what you can change, fix it up a bit. Personally, I would make my own mythology because I just think that's way more fun than just lifting another one.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna make a shape shifting creature, I'm not gonna fucking call it a skinwalker. I'm gonna give it a cool ass name.
I mean, you saying that makes me think of like because you can almost do like a replacement of the name and some features, and then it is almost yours.
Yeah,
Because there are very similar creatures in a lot of media.
yeah, and there are very similar creatures in mythology. Cultures in general have like a lot of similarities. You'll find
Yeah,
some unique differences between them, but there are some things which are also the same. I mean, like a lot of religions are like these old school pagan religions probably had a hunter deity, right? Especially
yeah.
considering like that's how they survived. Well, then they're not ripping each other off. They're just slightly different versions of a similar concept, like hunt. And if you create your own, you you can name it your own thing, and you don't take the risk of like insulting someone in the process, or
I know what you
pissing
mean.
a group of people off, I should say. What about you, Anthony?
What about me?
Yeah, would you write your own mythology, or would you just like steal other people's?
Bro, I'd steal it all. So I'll say it
Ah,
depend. It
the typical
depends
response.
on what I'm writing the story about. I probably would, I think, create my own. And depending on how much I want to get into it, like I would make it very detailed, or maybe it's like just I'm not going to bring it up that much and not very
Gotcha.
detailed at all. I feel like you can put a lot of work into making mythology, though.
Mythology building is fun. World building in general is very fun. Don't go
Yeah,
over with it. Any good American mythology you like, Anthony?
I need to get it, man. Trying to think. I think the Mothman's kind of cool, but like it's like I don't know. Maybe I like it because I don't know. West Virginia, bro.
Yeah, I'll just say there's a statue of him that makes him look cool as fuck,
Yeah,
right? But like if you actually listen to like depictions of him, he does not look anything like that. He looks so fucking stupid.
yeah. The statue I think looks worse than the
You
way they
think so?
describe him.
You
Yeah,
think
because they're like, oh, he's like big and covered in like fur or wings or something like that, and he's got
red
glowing
eyes?
eyes. And the statue, bro, it just looks like an alien
The
or
statue is
something.
like a generic alien creature.
I I would love to see some like I don't know some like cool like modern mythology of some kind. I don't know exactly what that be, but if
Yo,
someone's like, whoa, I saw. Florida Man, yeah, bro. Florida Man. That's my favorite mythology.
Fucking Florida Man would be fucking horrifying.
Bro, that'd be a Dark Souls boss, but like in the bonus, like after you kill all the other bosses.
Oh my god. After you kill God, you gotta kill the God inside of God, and it's just Florida Man coming out. Oh, that'd be, yeah, I'd fucking
As he
put
gets
that in.
closer, music's playing.
Fucking Blue Oyster Cult's.
So anything else on mythology, Gabe?
Mythology is a fun experience. You find some weird ass stories like the vagina one I mentioned.
Yeah, I could second that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't know any vagina ones like you, but yeah.
It just goes to show you like where my priorities are.
Yeah. I love how mythology ties into culture and like a lot of today and a lot of what we see started from what was, because a lot of those
Mhm.
stories and stuff kind of devolved.
They evolve, they change, they influence a lot of things too.
Yeah.
Be careful when you use other people's mythology. I don't think there's really much else to add to that convo.
Nah, I don't think so either.
I've been Gabe.
I've been Anthony.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast.
You can find our podcast on all major platforms. So, get your friends on the gang. They have no excuses. We're even on YouTube, where it's free. You can find us on all those at the Introspection and Banter podcast. We also have an Instagram at intro.banter, where I post updates of when our new episodes come out. And you can hit us up on Gmail at intro.banter@gmail.com. If you guys want to see a topic discussed, feel free to hit us up. You can leave a comment, DM us on social media, write in at Gmail. If you have criticism, feedback, we look at that as well. We are always trying to make our podcast a little bit better every day.